Hook, imagine building your life around something so sacred, so personal, that it becomes part of your very identity. Now, imagine waking up one day to find it stolen. Not by strangers with guns, not by thieves in the night, but by neighbors in suits and ties, holding contracts and calling it progress. That's what happened to me. The lake I inherited from my grandfather, the same waters where I learned to fish, where I first kissed my wife, where my children scattered her ashes, was taken over by a homeowners association. They said they had a vision. 79 vacation cabins. A resort destination. They called it development. I called it desecration. And in the end, when they thought they had won, when the cabins stood like smug monuments around my lake, I did the unthinkable. I opened the old dam gates my grandfather built with his hands, and overnight, I drained their dreams into the earth. This is not just a story of revenge. It's a story about love, about loss, about fighting for what's yours when no one else will. The lake wasn't just water and shore. It was my family's heartbeat. My grandfather, Elias, carved it into existence with grit and dynamite in the 1940s, building a modest earthen dam so the valley could hold water. He always said, "Water remembers who loves it." Some of my earliest memories are of standing barefoot on the dock he built, clutching his massive hand while he taught me to skip stones. Later, my father taught me to fish at dawn, and we'd bring our catch back to my mother, who fried them in cast iron while humming old gospel hymns. Every milestone of my life touched that lake. When I married Sarah, we took a canoe out under a sky full of stars, promising forever. Years later, after cancer stole her away, I spread her ashes where the lilies grow in late summer. My children, grown now, always said, "Dad, promise you'll never sell this place." It's who we are. I promised. But promises are hard to keep when men with money come knocking. It began with a slick man in a gray suit, his shoes too shiny for country dirt. He introduced himself as Trevor Hall, head of the new Lex HOA. He claimed that, technically, the land around the lake wasn't properly zoned and that new ordinances allowed shared community development. In plainer words, they were going to build. They showed me blueprints of 79 luxury cabins, a clubhouse, boat docks, and even a private members boardwalk. I told him to take his plans and leave my porch. But city council was already in their pocket. Weeks later, bulldozers rolled in, trees fell, and foundations scarred the once wild shoreline. The noise of hammers replaced the quiet song of loons. My protests were met with letters from lawyers. "You own the dam, not the lake," they argued. "Water is a shared resource." Every day I watched another piece of my life erased. By autumn, cabins stood like rows of teeth gnawing at the edges of the water. New owners arrived with shiny SUVs and smug smiles. They held barbecues, blared music, and acted as though my grandfather's lake had always belonged to them. I felt like a ghost haunting my own home. Then came the breaking point. One evening, I walked to the water's edge. The sun was setting, painting the cabins in gold. A little girl in a store-bought swimsuit splashed where Sarah's ashes rested. Her parents laughed, drinking beer on their rented deck. That sacred spot, our forever, was now someone's playground. My knees buckled. My chest ached. Grief twisted into something sharper. That night, sitting by the fireplace, I remembered grandfather's words. "Water remembers who loves it." And suddenly, I knew what I had to do. The dam was old, but sturdy. My grandfather had built it to last with stone, timber, and his own sweat. For years I maintained it. Oiling gears, replacing boards, walking its edge like a shepherd guarding sheep. Behind the cabins, no one thought twice about that dam. To them, it was just scenery. To me, it was a loaded gun, and I alone held the trigger. For weeks, I wrestled with myself. Was it right to destroy what they'd stolen? Would I be the villain? Or the protector? At night, I dreamed of Sarah, her voice soft, telling me, "Don't let them take what we built." The decision came one stormy night in late November. Rain lashed the windows. Wind moaned through the pines. I stood at the dam, lantern in hand, staring at the swollen lake. My heart pounded like a war drum. With trembling hands, I turned the iron wheel that controlled the gates. The gears groaned, reluctant, as though they too knew the weight of this choice. Then, with a shudder, the gates cracked open. The water surged forward like a beast released from chains. At first a trickle, then a roar. I stood soaked in rain and spray as the lake began to drain, its voice thunderous, unstoppable. Hours passed, the waterline sinking lower and lower, exposing mudflats and rocks long hidden. By dawn, the lake was gone. Where once shimmered a sanctuary, now stretched cracked earth, broken docks, and stranded boats. The cabins, built for their lake view, stood foolishly around a wasteland. Owners came running, horrified, demanding answers. Some cursed, others wept. Their resort was nothing without water. And me, I stood at the dam, tired but unbroken, watching their dream crumble. The HOA threatened lawsuits, of course. They called me reckless, insane, destructive. But in court, I showed the deeds. I owned the dam, and by law, I had the right to open or close it. Water, they said, was a shared resource. I agreed and smiled. Then let it be shared equally, dry for all. The case collapsed like their cabin's value. Investors pulled out. Families abandoned their vacation homes. Within a year, most of the cabins were empty shells, left to rot. But here's the part that matters: nature came back. Wildflowers grew in the mud. Deer returned to graze. The silence of the loons returned in spring, their calls echoing like forgiveness. I rebuilt the lake slowly, carefully, letting water creep back in. This time, it was mine again, not theirs. I often sit on the dock, watching the ripples dance in the sun. I whisper to Sarah, to grandfather, to the water itself. I kept my promise. A closing message: this story isn't just about revenge. It's about standing up when no one else will. It's about protecting what matters. Even when the world tells you to surrender, we all have a lake in our lives, something sacred, worth defending. And when the time comes, may we all have the courage to open our own gates, to let go of fear, and to fight for the things that make us whole.